Good morning, good day, good evening, everybody, wherever you are watching us from. Welcome again to Battle Chronicles from Gussie to the world. Today, guys, we have an amazing human being. But before we get to them introducing themselves, let me please take this opportunity to say thank you to our old subscribers. Thank you so much for engaging. Thank you so much for the likes, the shares. Please continue doing the Lord's work. And to the new subscribers, guys, grab a drink, grab a pen, grab a paper. Or if you're a lazy human being like this girl, grab your phone and record because this is how we do it, right? We're going to be sharing golden nuggets that are going to set you for life, especially if you want to glow, if you want to have beautiful hair, and if you just want to explore the world. Today we have Vish, but of course he's gonna introduce himself. Hey, love, I'm so happy to see you.
Hello. Oh, it's so good to be with you. It's been like such a long time since we last managed to like catch up, my goodness, from
Exactly.
our intern days. Um, oh, those were good days. Hi everyone, I'm Vishaal. I'm from Petermarisburg originally, and I currently work in an international school in the United Kingdom. I worked with Palesa in one of our schools during an internship program, and then we got really bonded. And I'm sure you've watched the previous video with
Mhm.
Coco and Elisa. Also, my
Yes,
girls, I
yes,
miss so much.
right.
Um, so I am currently a teacher of global politics, and I also teach a subject called Systems Transformation Pathway. But I did my internship program in economics and history during the IEB curriculum, and also delved a little bit into A levels there. But yeah, that's sort of the little overview about me.
So thank you so much, Vish. I mean, this conversation, this catching up situation on
Mm,
a Sunday is long overdue.
it
I mean, we haven't
is.
spoken in a minute. And everybody, like Vish has also said, please do check our other beginning of the segment with regards to the importance of internships because this is where this conversation is also going to delve from, right? And you've also heard, guys, internships don't just give you amazing experiences, they also give you lifelong friendships, right? And
Mm,
please don't sit or sleep on them. We've already spoken about this. You get the information from Isasa, you get the information from um old school ties. So today we're not necessarily going to delve so much so into the internship, but we just want to know life after internships, right? So Vish, you are in the UK, babe. Like, apart from the cold, everything
mm.
else, I just look at you and I'm like, that is absolutely amazing. Why the UK?
Why the UK? Well, during our internship program, you know that we were applying for jobs and we were hoping to
Mm,
see where we were, what would be the next step for us. And
yes.
so I took the approach of I'm going to apply locally, I'm going to apply internationally and see. I've always wanted to be in an international school because I
Yes.
wanted to do the IB as a curriculum. So for those who
Mhm.
don't know, the IB is the International Baccalaureate, and it's
Mhm.
sort of the alternative to A levels as an international syllabus.
Yeah.
Because I myself went to an IB school and
Mm.
I really saw the power and how great it was in terms of building critical thinking skills and
Mm.
having a l- good level of different knowledge in different subjects.
Yes.
And so while I was doing my application, during June, July, I think
Yeah.
is when I got an email back saying we'd like to interview you, and I was super
Mm.
excited because this is sort of the school that I got into is sort of
Yeah.
like the one of the epitome schools of global education, and I said I could
Yes.
not let this opportunity go.
Mm.
And then it came through, and I was I was honestly very surprised when I managed to get in,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I've never sort of seen myself in the UK, but the opportunity presented itself,
Mm.
and then I decided, let's take it. Let's see how it goes, and it's been
Mm.
good. I mean, the UK has its ups and downs. It's very
Like
different.
everywhere else,
It's
yeah.
so true, like everywhere else.
Yeah.
Um, but you get used to it over time.
Mm.
There's obviously times where you miss home a lot because the people are different, the vibe is
Yes.
different, the weather is
Yes.
different. Um,
The weather, like
uh,
literally, I have a fleece
right?
on.
I know I'm literally wearing a very warm hoodie right now inside the house. I know.
Exactly.
Exactly. But you slowly get used to it over time. Once you settle in, I'm
Yeah.
in the fortunate position that my housing's provided as well, and we have a really good community on campus of other young teachers,
Mm.
also from across the world. So we've been able to really connect with one another
Yes. Yes.
and try and build a sense of community. So that has really, really helped. And
Yeah.
have you ever seen that video where on TikTok it goes around saying you move abroad to earn more money only to go back home for holidays?
True. I
And that's
hear
sort of
you.
how it's been, right? So
I hear
I
you.
go home at least once or twice a year to spend a good amount
Yeah.
of time just to reconnect with the earth and just be with the
And
people that we
everyone.
love. And,
Yeah.
it brings that sense of being connected and being at home.
Sure. And I mean, I think one of the biggest thing that I'm realizing with regards to the importance of like global education over and above this critical perspective it gives you, but it also gives you like a very good like head start with regards to
Mm.
equal opportunities, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think more often than not, a lot of people don't necessarily understand that when coming to as an educator, of course, us being lifelong learners, which is something we promote in this channel, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously
Mm-hmm.
you'll see guys in my friend groups as well. One of the biggest thing about also being a lifelong learner is you also get to understand that that assists you in the challenging, critical thinking
Mm-hmm.
environment you're going to be around, not only with regards to your colleagues, but also the students, right? Because that is exactly what you promote. You promote people that are not just going to use the banking system where you just deposit, 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 and they regurgitate everything. But you need them to be challenging. You need them
Mm.
to critically think. So how has, and if any, because you also spoke about us being in that internship and you were exposed to international teaching and learning, but do you think there's a difference in the approaches, like if you compare the internship and the South African curriculum, even though it's internationally recognized? Do you
Mm-hmm.
think they're like varied differences? And um, if they are, what are those differences?
Mm. I would say there are a good amount of differences in terms of
Mm,
the curriculum
mm,
itself, but also
mhm,
in terms of how it prepares you. And I think how the internship prepares you for interacting with students and other staff members.
yeah.
Um, I think in terms of curriculum, what I've noticed is, I think we have, when looking of economics and history, I would say our history curriculum is incredibly strong back home. And I'd like
Right.
to give a good
Mm.
amount of what's the word? Thanks to the
Acknowledgement, yes,
the
yes.
curriculum developers, because it really gives
Mm,
you a very good breadth of knowledge about our history curriculum.
mm,
But I think there's a lot more that we can do to develop our
yes,
curriculum. What
yes.
I'm seeing on the international stage now is there's a push for this idea of reforming education and radicalizing
Mm,
education. It's taking very slow steps, but there's this idea of wanting to take more of a what we call, at least with the IB, taking this approach of systems transformation. So
mm,
understanding our place in the local context that we are in and how can we try and make a difference in that context, which I don't
mm.
think our IEB or CAPS curriculum necessarily
Prepares
tries
us.
to do so. It
Yeah,
prepares the
yeah,
student to do so. So there's
yeah.
these slow developments that these international boards are trying to do.
Mm,
And then in terms of the internship program and how it can really benefit you, what I really have seen is it's not just diversity of the staff members, but I feel like I learned so much from the other interns, right? We were
mm.
such a good select diverse unit from across
Yeah,
the country.
we
And
were.
even though we never got to see each other teaching in class, our
Yes.
interactions on a day-to-day basis and our sharing
Mm,
of knowledge and best practices allowed us to
mm,
actually hear from each other what have we been doing in these classes,
mm,
and
mm.
utilizing. I think there were a lot of things that I've heard from other interns that I was like, actually, let me try that in my class and see how it
Yeah,
goes. Let's
and
see how
see.
I interact
Okay.
with this student or this a student who's got this additional learning need and see how it works.
Mm, mm,
And I was just going to say that even though I didn't fully understand some things during that internship program, moving into a full teaching role where you're faced
mm.
with the day-to-day challenges, I reflect back on those days. I'm like, wait, actually, Coco would have taught a student this way who was
Yes.
struggling with a specific issue, or
Mhm.
Palesa would think about, you know. being more interactive with the student in terms of teaching this type of concept. So there's a lot of things that I think back on with the interns, but also the staff members as well.
Yeah. And I mean, we were also saying, you know, when coming to that specifically, the interactions that you get with regards to the knowledge
Mm,
that you know sponge off of is so beautiful. But
mm,
let's look at representation, right?
yes.
And let's think about it from a perspective of, and perhaps if we're going to be controversial, from a perspective of we all knew during our internship years that most, if not all of us, were overly qualified for the internship position, right? So
Yeah.
if we look at it from a perspective of representation, do you think the global education system expects certain people to be overly qualified as opposed to others? And if so,
Mm,
would you think, because I think that there's always the choose your heart, right? If so, do you not think at some point that benefits that overly qualified person, especially speaking back to the challenges that you're speaking back to?
hmm
Mm,
I do think that there is a bit of an element of that, right?
yeah.
Because the global education system, especially looking at schools, they want to try find the best of the best. And a lot of
Yes.
the time, you're not competing with people in your country like we would do
Yes.
for CAPS and IEB. You're trying to compete with everybody else across the world, who
Mm,
have attended this many universities, done these many different degrees, has
mm,
so many years of other experiences. So sometimes you've got to be very critical with the schools that you want to apply to, because not
sure.
all for some schools there's obviously a certain profile that they're looking
Mm,
for in certain
mm,
regions of the world,
mm,
and it's not going to always be accessible to majority of South Africans.
for
So it's
sure.
about really thinking about, will I be able to apply to the school, know that I'll be accepted, but also thrive in that environment,
For sure. For
right?
sure.
Because I think what's really important is that sometimes we think the grass may be greener on the other side, but you need to really
Mm,
understand sort of the challenges that you could potentially face in a different context, right?
mm,
So
mm,
other regions in the world, it can be very difficult for anyone of color to try and to thrive, because it's either
mm,
dominated by a specific ethnic group, or
mm,
leadership and management is seen in a specific way. The type
mm.
of teacher that this type of management wants for students to learn from needs to look a certain way.
Yeah.
So there is pros and cons in that perspective, right?
Mm, mm.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think what the second part of the question was again. Do you remember?
No, I mean, I'm thinking about it. I mean, you have answered it, but I
Mm,
was just asking with regards to, if the answer is yes, do you
mm,
then think that expectation prepares you to actually be able to handle that? Because obviously, if now that you've
mm,
spoken about this, and hence I'm like, I think you answered it. Now that you speak about you applying to this job position that wants a master's, that wants IP experience, that wants this and this and that, and
mm.
you getting in would then make you understand that yeah, it wasn't just about color, even though there's an impact.
Yes,
It
yes.
was about the fact that all these people in the staff room are doctors, right? So from a point of view, not being able to then jump into inferiority complexes or imposter
Mm,
situation, you also can stand your ground and say, well, I also have my MA, I also have this and that, you know
yeah.
what I mean? And I think for me, the one thing that I'm seeing happen is more and more, especially with regards to like the communities I'm also trying to get from a global perspective with regards to joining conversation around representation and diversity. And I mean, you know how much I live for things like that. But do you think representation is been taken into account with regards to diversity, especially
hmm
from an
hmm
education perspective? Because I think an educator's perspective, sorry, because I think one of the things that I've been having conversations around is teachers or people of color in these spaces saying the global community needs to understand that if you don't hire people that look like these children from a
Yes.
holistic perspective, some of those children are never going to understand the idea that comes from your mission statement that speaks about equality. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
do you think that the global community from an education perspective is starting to understand, and perhaps is starting to move more towards saying, let's open the doors more, because we've opened the doors for the students, but now let's try
Hmm.
opening the doors for the educators.
I think it's taking very slow steps. I'm thinking of like sort of my school and the group of schools we belong to, and there's
Yes.
always been this strive for having diversity and
Mm,
representation.
mm.
So I know that coming into the school, I was going to be able to fit in quite well because I would have been seen as an important hire, as somebody who belongs there. And this
Yeah.
idea of belonging becomes really important,
Yes. Yes.
because it sort of makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel wanted, and makes you feel
Mm.
respected.
Appreciated. Yes.
Yes. So
Mm,
amongst the sort of these groups of schools that have a very sort of liberal ideology, I would say yes, there's definitely this sense of wanting to diversify. In terms of
mm.
how long it's going to take for that to not just reach teachers, but reach middle management and senior management and then headship,
Yes.
is it going to be a
Yes.
different story. I would
Yes.
say within looking at international schools on the African continent, it's already
Mm.
there, right? It
Yes.
already
Mm.
sees that importance of representation and diversity in teaching,
Yeah.
which is for me really wonderful to see. In
Mm.
Europe, I would say in the United Kingdom, it's slowly developing because the
Mm.
demographics of the population is changing. So there's
Yeah.
already a slow but steady push for there. Mainland Europe potentially over time, but what I've seen is for East Asia, Southeast Asia, they are there. They are trying to get
I was about to say,
as
yeah.
much diversity as possible because they want to be
Mm.
seen as this hub, right? These hubs of attracting the best talent.
Yes, yes. Because I mean, I was looking at Asia specifically. I mean, I recently attended a virtual job fair, um, and for one of these big agencies, and I was just there, not necessarily from a looking for a job perspective, right? But just from a trying to understand what these international schools have got to offer. You know what I mean? And one of the things I
Mm,
realized was how like forward going, or how much they're
mm,
advocating for this idea of diversity, and it's actually there, like you're saying, it's actually there even in leadership positions, because one of these schools in Shanghai, or was it Beijing, actually has a head of school who is a person of color. And
mm.
you know what, it I promise you, and I think I understand from a perspective of it betters the school's mission statement if
It does.
everybody understands that. Because as soon as I saw that, it wasn't even just about me saying, oh my gosh, this is the school that I need to go to, but it was about, oh my gosh, somebody that looks like me is there. So even
Yeah.
me, I have a chance, you know what I mean? And it's
Mm,
also about what you said about, as soon as you apply to the school, because of the mission statement, because of what they stand for, you already felt like, me being a person of color is not of like a disadvantage consequence, but it's actually of an advantage consequence, because my role in this space is going to be acknowledged. I'm going to be taken care of. I'm
absolutely.
going to be respected. And I think, yes, the strides are very, like, we're moving like the tortoise, but we're moving nonetheless.
Mm,
And that's one of the things I'm trying to also like highlight, especially with people back home, to say, guys, at the end of the day, we cannot shy away from the fact that it's expected, like a lot is expected from you if you want to now compete in these international spaces.
mm,
But don't take it personally, you know what I mean? Take it from a point of saying, if I want to compete against the best, I have to be the best, so that I get there
mm,
and I don't fumble, and I get there and I don't perpetuate the stereotype that this is why we don't hire people like you, because you don't know what you're doing. I think when you're sitting at home at the moment, and you are, be a student or a PGCE student, and you thinking of applying and setting your foot into this international space, think about how you consistently have to work, right? You
mm.
need to think about how, and this is now my other question, how is professional development for you? Do you think it's overwhelming? Is it happening? Or do you think that it's at a level at which you are appreciating it, and it's just enhancing the teacher that you wanting to be?
Mm-hmm. And thinking about like what you said about the you going to this fair, I was at a recent conference and there was a school from China there who was so proud of the fact that majority of their hiring of teachers were from the African continent.
Mm.
And they were so proud of that fact, to say that we are able to represent this amount of diversity, but also
Yes.
to talk about how they are bridging that connection between China and Africa at the same time.
Yes.
So, there is so many opportunities for us as
Mm,
Africans. And I think what it also provides for us is this ability of being able to share our culture, be able to share our
mm,
version of truth and story.
yes.
So that's what I try to do in my classes. In the teaching of global politics, we talk about these idea of case studies, and we try to
Mm,
understand politics and international relation theory through that. So I have a class next week where it's on social movements. Instead of focusing on, the big social movements that we think about globally, like the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter
mm,
movement, I'm like, let me talk about roads must fall. Let me talk about fees must fall from back home, right? Because these aren't things that every student gets to hear about, but it has such global ramifications. But it also gives us a different sense of student agency. Students
yes.
have the ability to change the world
Yeah.
in collective numbers. And I love to share these different stories, to show these
Mm,
stories of Africa in a different light, that we are fighting for change, that we are fighting for a better life.
yeah. And we are like literally, like you said, we are fighting. I mean, I think I made a recent TikTok and I was talking about how until you understand the importance of representation, you're never going to
Mm,
understand the role that we play in these classrooms, right? So
yeah.
I was in a class with my elementary going towards middle school students, and we were talking about like who inspires you, right? And I was so intentional around speaking back to, because they are still not exposed to the American context or the South African context,
Mm-hmm.
but I was so intentional about speaking back to leaders like your Obama and your Maya Angelou and all these
Mm,
leaders that these kids would never ever ever be exposed to in the event I
mm-hmm.
wouldn't have been in the classroom, right? And it's literally all about this idea of saying you as a parent are taking your child to the school to expose them to life outside of them, outside of their lived
Exactly.
experience, outside of their reality. But that also speaks back to the people that teach them, so that when they get to these spaces, when your students go to America or the okay, they already know who the leaders are, they already know who the influencers are, and they already understand that those influencers have got a diverse representation and it's not just one prototype, right? Because that
Mm,
is what the problem then becomes, the fact that the global stage has been so used to having a prototype, then that the rest of us that aren't a part of that don't necessarily add of any value, and
yes.
how you speaking of it now is if these learners start learning about fees must fall and they start learning about roads must fall and all of those, then they understand that Teacher V is not only bringing value from an individual perspective, but
Mm,
is also carrying value from a communal perspective, because where he comes from, there's a certain fight that is happening that is affecting and influencing our reaction towards it, even though
mm-hmm.
we don't necessarily see the direct relation or the direct implication. And
Yeah.
I'm so excited to then be having these conversations so that people like us that want to go to these global spaces understand that when you make that application, which is so rigorous, which is something I then
Mm-hmm.
want to talk to you about, when you make that application that is rigorous, that is competitive, that is so like intimidating in its infancy, even before you get to the regret or accept email, just starting the application is it's so intimidating. You need to know you're not just going to be representing yourself. You need to know you're
Mm-hmm.
not just be carrying you and your surname. You're carrying a whole of South Africa, a
Exactly.
whole of the country that you come from, and that comes with the level of pressure, but it also comes with the sense of pride, and
It
we need
does.
to focus on the pride more than the pressure, because everybody must just pick their struggle.
A
So
100%.
how was the process for you? Just take me through, just in a brief summary, and I mean you spoke about it earlier that you applied, but how was the this is me sending an email, this is I got the response back, and
Mm,
then after 3 months I needed to sort out my papers, this is what sorting out my papers looked like, and then this is how I ultimately got into a flight and got to
yeah.
my house.
Well, it was a lot when I think about
Mm.
it. So
Yeah.
now the
Mm.
first step is just doing this, filling in a PDF form where
Mm.
it's like, you work so hard on building a CV, but
Yes.
then what you've got to now do is rewrite that entire thing on this form,
Mm.
and there are certain questions you had to answer. So it's sort of like understanding, like, why are you applying to the school? What do you believe in the mission of the school, the mission of
Yeah.
this movement? Um, and then I also did a cover letter on the side as well to add on to that application to try and show
Mm.
w- the other side to me and sort of what I can bring and why
Mm.
this why is it that I really want to be at this school.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of the, if I remember, that application page was around 4 to 5 pages long, just filling in details and details and details. And then I spent a good amount of time writing my cover letter that was around
Mm.
a page long. And so after I submitted it, I forgot about it because I was like,
Mm.
I don't know what the odds are of me applying. And guys, apply. Just don't think because you haven't been abroad potentially or you haven't got
Mm.
this level of experience that you're not
Yeah.
going to catch the eye of somebody else.
We
You know?
yeah. We live
Exactly.
in
We are
proof
there, right?
literally straight after internships and a year or two working as
Exactly. Like
yeah.
within a few months, we got opportunities. Palesa would got an opportunity like that. She was snatched so fast by another
Yeah.
school. It took,
Yeah.
and then it took me 6 to 7 months to be able to be seen and be visible, you know. And
Mm.
so at that point came sometime in mid-June or towards the end of June, where I got an email being like, "We'd like to have an interview with you." And so they said that the process was going to be around, it's going to constitute 3 or 4 different activities. The first was a
Mm.
panel interview, and sort of was about 30 minutes long of being
Mm.
asked by different stakeholders amongst the school, and there was also a student representative on the
Nice.
panel as well.
Mm.
Um, Then, once you're done with that, the second thing was a second panel interview that was split into 2 times. So the first thing was just to get a better understanding of who you are again, but then
Mm.
you had to teach a class for 30 minutes.
Okay.
So it was difficult because it's an online teaching experience
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah.
how am I supposed to teach this class of 18 kids online? I can't really see their faces clearly. I don't know any of their names. I don't know their
Mm.
backgrounds. So it's about trying to navigate the space of being uncomfortable and realizing
Yeah.
that you are a teacher. You
Mm.
know actually how to teach. Have
We
confidence and
do.
belief in
Yeah.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
And try and play around with this alternative way of teaching
Of
online,
teaching. Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And so I took that, and then after I taught that class, what I did was thinking in my head, they're probably going to ask me what are things I could do to improve. What did I do well? So they gave me like 10 minutes to just like debrief, and I
Mm.
had a piece of paper next to me, and I just wrote all the different things I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't do this very well, or I think I did this,
Mm.
but I could do this better in this way.
Mm.
And so then I go back into the second part of the interview, and then they're asking me questions, and then at some point halfway through the interview they're like, you taught this class, so what do you think you could have done better? And I was like, just give me a
I
second.
knew
Give
it.
me a second. And so I have this piece of paper in front of me, and I'm listing every single thing, and you could see their
Mm.
faces being like, oh wow, like he actually had time to think and
Reflected.
reflect,
Yeah.
on how to improve this class. And
Yeah.
I think that helped me stand out because I was
Yeah.
instantly prepared because I had like 5 or 6 different things written down.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and I think that really, really helped me as well because they were like, this teacher is organized, he's
Mm.
reflective, he's able to understand on what he needs to improve on for our next class,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And so then after that, it was a waiting for like a good week, and then I get another email saying,
Mm.
you are our preferred candidate. We would like you to have an interview with the principal.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
then I spoke to the principal, which was just a very casual conversation
Conversation.
because they are just trying to get to know who you are as a person to make sure
Mm.
that this preferred candidate is a true fit.
Mm.
And so I had a good 20-minute conversation with the principal, and he was like, "Well, I will tell them to go ahead and send you the
The
forms to fill in."
contract.
And I was just like,
Mm.
"Okay, I've got it. This is life changing." So it
Yeah.
is it's tiring, it's rigorous, it requires a lot of preparation beforehand, but
Mm.
if you do it well, there's so many opportunities, right? You have that potential of getting it. You have the
Mm.
potential of that maybe if you didn't make it at this time, they will consider you later
Somewhere,
on down the road.
yeah,
But it's
yeah.
also such good experience for future interviews down as well.
Sure, sure. And I think for me, what I'm learning from you is exactly this idea that we were having this conversation a few minutes before we started, that these applications are so intense,
Mm,
right? They are not your name, qualification, how long have you been a teacher, right?
yeah,
They tell me your teaching approaches. What different teaching techniques do you use? Which ones do
exactly.
you like? Which teaching approaches don't you like? It's not your typical what do you really do with classroom management. It's your how do you ensure
Mm,
that all your students are valued and seen in a classroom? And I think after having understood that these are the questions that are asked from intentionally from the application, as soon as you get to the next level, you also get to understand that these schools look for a particular person, but the prototype for them is got nothing to do with race or color or age or experience, more so
exactly.
than not, but it's got something to do with values and intentionality with regards to your teaching. And that is
Yes.
something like I think um our people at home need to understand that being reflective and having intentionality in your classroom, but also
Mm,
understanding the importance of lifelong teaching and you being a lifelong learner is what sets you apart, right? So this level of reflection also comes with continuous learning, and I'm also wanting to understand from you, how has that been for you, and like what kind of approach does the school take or the international space take with regards to professional continuous development?
hmm I think there's a lot of opportunities. So,
Mm,
um,
mm,
for example, for schools who don't have much resources or financial capabilities, what they will do is they will obviously the one thing they have to do if you're in the IB space is send you for training. So you go,
mm,
it may be online training, maybe face-to-face training, but
mm.
they're in the IB. Depending on your subject, there are three different levels. So they call it Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3.
Nice.
And if you are completely new to teaching the IB, they would send you on a Cat 1 course, which is like
Yeah,
2 to 3 days, and the same goes for Cat 2, 3. And then
yeah.
depending on your experience and familiarity, you can go into a different Cat level. So for
Mm,
me, I came in, but I already had two experienced teachers in my subject space. So the
mm,
idea was let's spend a year learning from them,
mm.
and because they've got such good amount of knowledge, and then in your second year we will send you on a higher level of training. So
Nice.
what I learned from my colleagues, which was phenomenal, because going into a new subject, you have to still learn the ropes of the
Yes.
curriculum, the assessment, about how to
Teaching
mark,
them. Yes.
moderating with these experience,
Yeah.
the teaching, learning of yourself of how to teach these new things.
Yeah.
Um, so I spent the year learning from them, and then halfway through the year, after using the resources, I decided let me create my own resources. I use this as inspiration, but now I'm set in stone. I understand how this curriculum is starting to look at.
Mm,
I understand
mm.
how this teaching is working. I'm going to take time for myself to create. And by creating, you're already learning how to
For sure.
develop, visually appealing slides.
Mm,
You're learning how to also get your content ready. So after that, after my first year of teaching, I asked them, could you please send me on my subject development or professional development. So I managed to get my professional development um, in my second year, where I got to go to Dublin for 2 3 days, and
yeah.
I was able to meet other teachers and
Mm,
connect with them and build my network and build my
learn.
understanding.
Yes.
And then other schools also, for example, have opportunities, or they, depending on how they view professional development, they could see it sort of as collaborative practice or
For
doing
sure.
learning walks, being able to give you time to go into a classroom and see how another teacher deals with the class, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then you may also have the opportunity where some schools may be able to afford to pay for further education. So that could be
Mm,
doing postgraduate certificates or diplomas or a master's degrees.
mm,
Um, so there is a lot of opportunity on that side. They
yeah.
may even ask you to potentially teach a new subject if you're interested in learning. right?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
have some form of connection to it, but you've never really delved as deep. So let's say, for example, like back home, if we do a PGCE, you've got your first level subject and the second
Mm.
level. I can't even remember how we did it. Remember, we had
Yeah. Yes.
FET and then
And senior phase. So your
senior
FE
phase.
would be economics and history, and
Yes,
your senior phase will be
like
EMS.
yes.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, you have that senior phase, and you're at this international school, and they're looking for an economics or a business teacher, but you actually only teach history. They're like,
Mm.
you've already got this experience. Would you not like to try to teach the subject, and we'd give you the training
Mm.
necessary? Like that
Mm.
opens up so many more doors for you
For
down the
sure.
line
For
for
sure.
development. And then
Yeah.
if you're able to connect and network really well, you get the opportunity to potentially work with these curriculum development organizations. So for me,
Mm.
because I was part of this network of global politics teachers, someone posted in our WhatsApp group, hey, there's this opportunity to create um, resources online for the subject. And I was like, wait,
Mm.
okay, I get paid
I want to.
and I can get my name out there, like as a
Mm.
new teacher, as absolutely. So what I did is I was like, okay, can you please send me the details? I'd love to speak to this other person at the IB and see if
Involved.
I
Yeah.
could interview with them. I interviewed with them. I told them this is what I could potentially work on. This is my experience, and they're like, yeah, sure. This sounds like very exciting. Let's get you on board. Let's see how what resources you can create. And
You
there I
can
was.
bring.
I was
Yeah.
able to create these resources for a subject that's available to teachers globally, but it gives me my name
Yes.
is out there. I know I've been able to contribute. It's elevated sort of my level of understanding, and I've also
Yes.
then got to network even more with the people who are part of that organization.
Mhm. And I think the biggest thing I'm getting from you, Vish, is this idea of putting yourself out there. And I think
Mm,
it's one of the limitations that we as a South African, or we as a new teacher, or we as a teacher that feels like I'm not good enough have, right? We have this limitation where you, from also a cultural perspective, like if I think about it, and I think about how in some of our spaces, we still get told, don't be too forward, know your place, right?
mm,
And those limitations, when we look at it from a professional perspective, those are the things that then always make us get overlooked by people that can open doors for us, because those people don't know we're interested, they don't know we're capable, they don't know we actually want to grow, because we're from cultural backgrounds and we're from societies that
yes,
say when you get into a space, firstly appreciate that you're there, don't be too forward, don't be too pushy, don't be too loud, right? Just know
yes,
your. And that is one of the things that I'm getting to actually understand the importance of breaking, break
mm,
that wall down, be
absolutely.
loud, be intentional, be forward, take every opportunity, and
Mm,
expose yourself so that you're able to immerse yourself. Because at the end of the day, you can't tell students that they learn by doing, but you don't do your biggest doing outside of being in the classroom, right?
yeah.
And a lot of us really, really limit ourselves from that perspective. And I'm so appreciative of how you speak back to it. The idea that, guys, network, network, network. I mean, we spoke
Mm,
about, like I always speak about it in these conversations, but we even spoke about it in the previous, that you never know who you're having a conversation with. So if you
exactly.
are in a workshop or a seminar, or you send for training, and you only answer questions that you asked, or you only ask questions that you think make sense, but you don't ask the stupid questions, or you don't answer things outside of that space where people can get to potentially know who you are as a holistic individual, then you
Mm,
you tend to shoot yourself in the foot, because the one thing I'm getting to understand about this international space is how important holistic approach is, not only
yes.
from a professional perspective but also from a personal perspective. Because I think what they're driving is, if Vishal is a happy human being outside of the classroom, Vishal is going to be a happy human being inside of the classroom.
Exactly.
Therefore, we need to understand who Vishal is as a human. And I think that's one thing that we need to know as these entry level teachers that are coming in, or even experienced teachers from home that want to infiltrate the global space, that you really need to know who you are. What
Mm,
what ticks you, what are your ticks, what are your triggers, what do you love doing, what makes you literally not sleep at night. If it's
mm,
creation for me? What type of content creation? If it's outdoorsy for Vishal, what type of outdoorsy things do you like doing? Because at the end of the day, if you don't know who you are, there's very little that you can
Yes.
tell the next person, right? and
Mm.
and that becomes hard for you to even build a community, because I mean, you spoke about that, and now I want to delve into that. Like, how has it been, being a part of this expert community? Like, what are the grades, and what are the sometimes, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming for me moments?
Oh wow. I would say like especially when I'm looking at the young teachers as well, and then thinking
Mm,
about sort of the backgrounds they come from, the educational experiences they have, you're just like, oh my wow, like you are so incredibly talented.
mm,
Um, and there's so much I learn from them on a day-to-day conversation, whether it is about work, whether it is about life, but you learn how to be more vulnerable. You learn
mm.
how to not just see your colleague as a colleague, but as a human
Agree.
and individual that you can connect with, that you can,
Mm,
be able to experience life with.
mm, mm,
Um, and I'm thinking about some of my colleagues who are just like they're geniuses, right? The way that
mm.
they see things is just so different. It's so unique. It makes you feel more
Exciting. Mm,
motivated in terms of
mm,
looking and reading new things and exploring new things.
mm,
So I would say my experience here with the stuff has just been so warm. Like everyone is just so welcoming, you know
mm,
and it makes you want to be in this community longer, makes you want to contribute more, you know?
mm, mm,
Um, yeah, so I am thinking about it. I'm just so grateful for the colleagues that I have around me because every day that I interact with them, it's always sort of, you grow up, you're like, I can't wait to see my class, right? I'm so glad to see my students, but it's also like I can't wait to see what I'm gonna say or how I'm gonna interact with my colleague the next day, right? There's
yeah.
also that excitement of I'm seeing all of these people every day.
And I'm getting to learn, and I'm getting to share, because that's also that other element where you
Mm,
yourself are very comfortable with what you bring to the table. So
yes.
when you get to conversations, there is something for you to share, there is something for you to contribute, because you've immensely prepared yourself to be in that
Mm,
particular space. So when we look at this idea of moving abroad, right?
mm,
How does your day as an international teacher look, and is it different from your day as a African teacher with regards to preparation, lesson plan, the few minutes you have in between classes, the how long is your classroom, like the lunch, the dinner, just take us through
mm.
the day of an international teacher in the UK.
Okay. So at my school, we sort of have it's a very interesting sort of timetabling situation where you have what we call classes. So we have classes that range from, we've given a letter number to each. So it goes from
Mm,
A to G.
okay.
Yes. And it's on a rolling basis. So you could potentially be teaching 3 or 4 classes a day. If you are lucky, sometimes it's 2 classes a day.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm going to use the situation where, let's say, I have 3 classes a day.
Yes, three.
Okay. So um, I'd wake up as normal. School starts at 8. So let's say I have my first class that is, so we have something called higher level and standard level, but
Mm,
in my subject, we just have higher level classes.
okay.
So I spend 70 minutes. So higher level classes are around 70 minutes of a class, and standard level is 50 minutes.
Mhm,
So I'd have that first class, then let's say I have my free class now, and I'd use that time either to connect with a colleague, or I'd use that time to either quickly think about how I'm going to reevaluate or reflect on this lesson and prepare for
mm,
my next lesson. Um, or I use that time to network further with our other staff, right? So
mm,
working with the academic administration staff, or if going into a different part of the campus where it's more of the administration staff who are busy with communications or engagement or philanthropy,
mm.
or whether there are human resources, just to connect with them on an
With
individual
them.
level, right?
Yeah.
Then we have a 20-minute break. I think it's 20 minutes, where again, everyone goes and collects themselves into the staff room. You debrief, you get a cup of coffee or a tea, and you just talk and you chill out for a bit, and then you go back to classes and finish the remaining two classes for the day, finishing around 10 past 1. And then you get lunch. Being part of a boarding school is nice because you actually can get
You
potentially that
eat at
lunch
school.
paid
Yeah,
for, right? So
yeah.
our school's cafeteria, I think, is really quite good. So I'm
Mm,
pretty lucky with the food that we get. It's filling, it's substantial. You get desserts, you can get soup, you can get a nice dish and salad. So no, you eat properly there.
yeah.
And then from 2 o'clock, you either have meetings. So you could either have staff meetings or you would have your extracurricular activities.
Nice,
So that's
nice.
usually from 2 to 4. And then
Mm-hmm.
from 4 to 5, you'd spend that time either offering office hours to students or you'd use it as planning and preparation.
Mm.
And then afterwards, you go back to being a teacher at home because, teaching never stops.
It never
So you are
stops when the
preparing and
last bell
preparing.
rings. Exactly.
So it's still more preparation into the
Yeah,
night, right? Because
yeah.
I think with teachers, we take our job so seriously at the same
Mm.
time that even if you know that you are ready for the next day, you
You
want
still
to be
want
sure.
teaching. Yes, you
And so
still
then
want to.
you,
That slide, I'm not sure if they're going to
mm,
understand it. Then you go look for another slide that's going to be much more critical or challenging or much more simplified, you know?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
I
and then
hear you. Mm.
we still got our marking and our assessments and
Yes,
planning for tests. So it does take a lot of work outside of working hours as well.
yes,
And I
yes.
think there's always, I mean, I don't agree with this, with the expectation that we should be working after school is done, right? I want
Yeah.
to at some point try to fight against that. Um,
Yeah, so that
just
we do
for
have a real work-life balance. Like the
exactly,
work-life balance is real and sincere, you know?
exactly. But
Yeah.
I also understand that, being a young teacher, it's also going to take time for you to get familiar with everything and be
Yeah.
super um, fast
Ready.
and ready
Yeah.
and efficient. So there's managing that expectation as well.
Mm.
But it does take a long time. But having those holidays really does is great to just debrief. But being a teacher is tough. It's draining. We're
Mm.
interacting with so many people a day, so many
And
questions that
those
we're being
different
asked.
energies. Oh
You are
my
thinking.
goodness.
You are
Yeah.
continuously thinking and thinking and
Yeah.
thinking. So that mental energy in space is just, you can get burnt out at some point. So watching out
True.
for your mental health, if that
It's
means
important.
going out for a walk during that free break, if it's
Mm.
about on that weekend, let me treat myself and go visit this other city. Let's get out. Let me
Mm.
just realize that my life isn't just
Detach for
constrained
a
to being a
second.
teacher.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I think there are some challenges when it comes to being an international teacher, but I think it's the same for teaching anywhere, right?
It's
Um,
life.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think the only difference is if you're an international teacher, the one thing that you also got to then be wanting to build upon is that community. So it's about
Mm.
finding people outside of the school if that's your thing,
Mm.
or making an active commitment to try and being more out there, which can
No,
also drain you,
true.
especially if you're introverted or
Mm.
your social battery is running out. So yeah, those are all of different things to
Yeah.
consider.
So, what has been the hardest? Like, what has been the hardest thing that you probably feel like if I was back home in South Africa, I wouldn't necessarily have to deal with this element, you know? Because I mean, we've spoken about
Mm,
so much greatness, and I think sometimes when we do prepare these learners, or not necessarily learners, sorry, when we have conversations around potential aspirant international teachers, we need to give them the holistic picture, you know, because that's what we're advocating for. So yes, these are all the great things, but for me as Vishal, this is the one disadvantage that I feel you need to prepare for yourself. I mean, I think you spoke already about the fatigue and people needing to be intentional about their mental health. But for
mm.
you, what is that one thing that you feel like it's still a challenge for you, and you feel everybody that's wanting to step into this international teaching space needs to be intentional about preparing for that particular thing?
I think there is this idea of sort of imposter syndrome
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
sense of I feel like I need to continuously prove myself. And I don't know,
Mm,
like you said, if it's because of the way we were brought up, where,
mm,
we've growing up in South Africa, that you have to prove yourself in certain ways, right?
yeah,
To try
yeah.
and reach certain places or to be seen as being serious. And
That's
I
the
think that
thing.
that mindset is still within me, where it's just like I feel like I have to continuously try and be the best as possible and try to
Mm,
continuously prove myself,
mm,
where at some points it can make you feel like make you want to doubt your ability.
your
And so
ability.
sometimes it's about recognizing that you are actually doing a really good job, and
Mm,
sometimes you need a second person to tell you to
for sure.
just chill, calm
Yeah.
down, you can take
Indeed.
a
Yeah.
break, you are fine, you are organized, you have everything under control. Like,
Mm,
you don't need to prove anything, because one, your relationship with the students prove it, your relationship with your colleagues prove it, your results prove it, you know.
mm.
And I think that can happen for a lot of people, where you just, especially if you're young, if you're new to teaching, where you just want to show that, you are the best, you're
I
being the best
deserve
you
to
can
be
be.
here. This is
Exactly.
why I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
amazing. Look at me. Yeah. Yeah.
But that has still been continuously challenging for some reason.
Mm, mm. And I think, like you said, for the next couple of years, it still will be because it's like an inherent humanistic, uh, you know, instinct where you like until I'm sure that everybody, including myself, understand that I'm here for a reason and I deserve to be here. Only then, it's like when we say we've been in the trenches, like an internship prepares you to be in the trenches, and you graduate internships being, I know I'm a capable teacher, but it's
Yeah.
like, okay, now you being a capable teacher, the internship is no longer your parameter. Now you're needing to look amongst other capable teachers, and
Yeah.
until you get to perhaps middle management or senior management, only then can you relax. But I always say, I mean, in life, holistically, also generally, are we ever going to get to a point of relaxing, especially if you are a perfectionist or if you are very goal
Mm,
driven? I don't think you're potentially going to be at a point where you're like, yeah, I've done all I needed to do. I think you're always going to want to say, this is the next thing I want to do, right? It's just
yeah.
about you, the person saying, when it's time for me to breathe, I need to breathe, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we spoke about is this idea of the school developing you. But the one thing I would say, especially for people that are wanting to come into these spaces, is you need to find resources and spaces like you spoke about, starting your own resources. But look
Yeah.
at portals and resources where you can potentially develop yourself, because these international schools also want to see in your CV that there's continuous professional development. And as much as our South African schools take us to these trainings and these workshops, we never get to receive any sort of certificates, where these schools don't even know that we have the knowledge that we possess. So
Yeah.
I think one of the things everybody who's at home needs to also take cognizance in is, guys, continuous professional development is the bread and butter of international schools, and you need to get the hang of it even before you get into that air
Mm,
flight.
mm-hmm.
And let's talk about the support, Vish.
Yeah.
How does the school support you with regards to your visa, your flight?
Yeah.
Do they support you, your medicals? How does that conversation look like?
Okay, so yeah, they definitely did support me with the visa, in the sense of paying for the visa to
Nice.
the UK. So they paid everything. They sent me the money, and I was able to pay for it.
Mm,
Um, and then a flight for us. I mean, there are some schools where you can be extremely lucky and get a flight paid back every year, a return flight.
mm,
But mine was a flight here, beginning of contract, and then I get a
mm.
flight um, back every 3 years.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, so getting to the school, they will make sure that you get to the school. They give you a relocation
Yeah.
package as well. But then, depending again on the school's resources, they will
Mm,
then offer flights at different intervals throughout whatever your
no,
contract period is.
no.
Um, they also then, what was it? So it's visa, it's flights. They helped us with housing. So as soon as we arrived, because I arrived the second day of orientation, I think it was.
Okay.
So thankfully, and as they helped me up into my apartment, I walk in and there's already like the basics provided. So they
Nah.
provided you with bread, milk, cheese, butter,
Mm,
jam, baked beans, eggs, like all the
mm.
basics you need for the first week to help you settle in.
Just settle, yeah.
Exactly. Um, and that sort of the basics of it. They obviously offer you contact and support during that period of application, and making sure that when you are at immigration that they're ready for a call in case there's some sort of problem with the border official,
Yeah.
and that if they have to get you a taxi, that they will make sure that the taxi is there for
You
you,
do.
or someone is there to
Yeah.
pick you up. So
Mm,
that was incredibly supportive. But I think
mm.
it's a general thing for all
For
schools
the school. But
nationally. Yeah.
like with regards to I mean I know with our process, yes, so there's the visa, but there's also the police clearance, there's also the you need to
Ah,
take your
mhm.
stuff to I don't know, Saka, you need to did you have to go through all the process where you have to apostille your documents, you have to go for medical checks, you have to is that a process
Oh
something that you
yes, yes.
yeah,
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. Hey. Luckily, we had our police clearance ready because we had to have one. We applied for it during our
yeah.
internship. So it came
Mm,
eventually, and I could use that ready. But then I also
nice,
had to use my one police clearance from China when I was in China some time ago. So
nice.
luckily, I already had that with me because one of
Yeah,
the application questions are, how many countries have you visited or stayed in for the past 10 years? And if you
nice.
stayed in certain countries for a certain period of time, they needed proof of your police clearance. Then I
Mm,
had to go do a TB test in Pretoria,
mm, mm,
at
mm.
the that UN migration office, which
Sure.
costs money, guys. Like it's a lot of money. It's like about
I
two and
mean,
a half
nobody
thousand.
should ever lie to you that immigrating or moving abroad is cheap. It isn't. The thing you need to understand is, even in the event that the school supports you with the finances, sometimes some schools pay it back, but at some point you
Exactly.
need to save for it, you
Yes.
know? Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So so sometimes when I'm hearing other colleagues and I'm hearing other people at other schools, sometimes you have to actually pay from your own pocket. And then
Mm,
when you arrive at the school,
yes.
there's still a whole process of waiting like 2 to 4 weeks in order to
For
get that
them to pay
refund
you
back.
back exactly, but
Exactly.
I always say, guys, if the school wants you and you guys need to start having that conversation of paying, you can almost always be very honest with them and say, I'm not at a potential possibility potential position to pay,
Exactly.
can you assist me? Because I think I know with my partner, that's the conversation that was had when he had to come to South Korea, where they were like, no, can you pay for this for the flight, and the money that you were supposed to reimburse me with already belongs to you, you know, because I can assure you I'm gonna get there, my person is already there. Because I think sometimes some schools say bring yourself here so that once you get here we know we can pay you back, because some people get sent money and stuff but then they never
Yes,
make it, you know what I mean? So
exactly.
I can understand from the school's perspective to say do everything and we'll give you back, because there's a lot of red tape. But I
Mm,
always tell everybody that if that conversation arises and you really sincerely cannot, don't be afraid to speak to your finance people, to your HR people, and just be honest with them. You know, I think
absolutely.
if you've already gotten to a point where you guys are having conversation around when you're getting there, those people want you. So
Yeah,
you need to be transparent and be honest and speak your truth.
absolutely.
Yeah. So it was, so how long was the process from your first sending documents to
Mm.
SAPA to flying out of South Africa?
Yo, okay, so that SAPS police clearance took a long time,
Ah,
guys.
that takes
So
forever.
it takes forever. So I would say, as a teacher, just make sure you continuously just are ready
Mm,
or you have your police clearance every year.
mm,
Right? If you are deciding that you want to apply abroad, apply for your police clearance maybe
mm, mm.
2 months before you think you want to apply, so that if you
Yeah.
get a job, you have
Then
that
it's already
great
on its way.
there. It's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Um, so that took a long time because we applied for that beginning of the year, and mine only came like it got lost somewhere in Pietermaritzburg. It was not at the right police station, and they had to go and
Mm,
find it at a different police station. So these
mm,
complications can happen, guys.
yeah. And they
Um,
waste time.
and
Yeah.
waste so much time. And
Mm,
the offices close at a certain point. The lines are so long at some point.
yeah.
So be ready that you may need to have some time off to actually go and fetch it and wait.
Mm,
That could be a potential expectation.
mm,
The immigration health thing, I was able to do it during a holiday period.
mm,
But that itself is also an entire day long process because
mm,
people are there also waiting for hours and hours during the morning to get everything done. And
mm,
then you're only really done by 3 p.m. and then you wait for the document to come and you've got to have it. It's a TB document. It's also um, something else that they check for as well.
mm,
So that takes a very long time. The visa stuff, you've got to make sure you have every piece of information. So that can
mm,
take a long time. It may take you up to maybe if let's say you have all your documents ready, you may spend between half a week to a week to make sure that your application's 100% correct before you
mm,
click that submit button. Um, so once you submit, it could take, it depends now. So during my period of time, it took about 3 to 6, no, yeah, 3 to 5, 6 weeks for them to actually give a decision on a skilled
mm,
workers visa.
mm.
Luckily, now that they've cleared the backlogs, if you had to apply today, it could potentially take 2 to 3 weeks. But
Nice,
I
nice,
would say the entire process could, let's say, maybe take you 2 months. And then
nice,
remember, you
nice.
also have to give notice as well to
You
your,
do to your boss, right?
yeah.
But now let's the last three questions, and thank you so much for this. But with regards to just the range, right? So
Mm,
when we're looking at range, of the salary, not necessarily, diverging confidential information, but
mm,
what is the salary range of a new entry teacher in
mm-hmm,
the UK, and what is the cost of living, and do you think those two things
mm.
match with regards to conversation?
Okay. So I think there's I think two salary scales in the
Mm,
UK. Not two salary scales, but there's the country state school scale, what every
mm,
all state school teachers get paid at, and
mm,
that starts at around. It depends depending again if you're in Scotland, England, or
mm,
Wales. So
mm.
Scotland generally always has a higher entry point. So that's
Okay,
about, I'm gonna assume maybe 1 or 2 thousand pounds more than what would be in Wales and England. So
okay,
Wales is around starting salary probably around £31,000,
a
and
year.
then yeah, £31,000 a year, and
Hmm.
then you take a step up each year.
Okay,
And they
nice.
also do, the government will decide on inflationary increases as well. So
Hmm.
at least for the first 6 years, you will be able to go up the salary scale.
Mm,
And then things happen, you have to apply. Then you have private schools that may have completely different salary situations because they
mm,
could be in the situation of paying you a bit less because they're offering you different benefits, or maybe they're
mm,
paying you way more, right? If you're based
mm,
in London at an international school, you could be starting at like 45,000 pounds potentially. Um,
mm.
but then again, living in London, guys, as a teacher, I would say I would not
Don't do
recommend it
that.
because
Yeah,
it's going to be unaffordable. London is too expensive, and I don't think people understand that when they come here. Like
yeah.
rent is crazy there. Um, so there's a lot. Yeah, I'm trying to think for if you're considering about coming to the UK, like
Mm,
really think about the city and where the school is based because the
mm.
cost of living is going to vary drastically, right?
Depending
I would
on the
say
school.
prices of fruits and vegetables are relatively quite similar to back home.
Mm-hmm.
But if you enjoy going out for dinner or going out for a drink, it's gonna cost you a lot of money. Like,
Mm,
if it's maybe it's you and your partner, for example, if you're going out to a pub, you're
yeah.
ordering a standard burger and chips with maybe one drink each, that's
Mm,
gonna come up to maybe around £40. Right,
mm.
and that's close to 1,000 rand on one night out of just a basic burger and chips or fish and chips and one
Yeah,
drink.
I
So
hear you. I hear
that
you. Yeah.
the enjoying life outside is going to cost a lot of money. But if
Mm,
you are cooking things for yourself, I would say it's relatively quite similar to back home. You know, you may find things maybe more on a Pick and Pay price because I feel like Pick and Pay's prices have gone up way too much back home, that it's even more expensive than Woolies.
I'm
I'm
like,
like,
what is happening
what is
here?
happening out here? So it's not more Woolies prices for me, it's Pick and Pay prices.
Mm,
Um, so cost of living is a lot. If you are lucky, you can potentially get accommodation provided by your school.
your
That's
school.
usually
Right.
done if they are a boarding establishment. If you
Mm,
are in a day school, it's going to be challenging. So if you may need to ask the school to potentially help you find a deposit to put down, because
mm.
certain cities will require you to put a 6-month deposit down for an apartment, and there's always
Hey guys,
prices
moving to the UK is not for the
it's
faint-hearted.
not. It really is.
Wow.
Like the village, like a two-bedroom cottage in the village down by my school, like
Yeah.
below my school, costs £1,250 per month. That is 25 to 30,000 rand per month,
No, mark me absent,
right?
Vish. Mark me absent.
So
I'll come visit you, friend. You're not
it's a
allowed like
lot.
that. But what?
Yes, housing here is a lot. If you're
Mm-mm.
expecting, that's why in these big cities in London and Bristol and like Edinburgh, for example,
Yeah.
people share apartments. Like you rent a room.
Yeah. I heard somebody say that. I mean, there's this girl who's got a YouTube channel and she's working in a state school in the UK and she's like, I live with three other people. Like I have roommates, and
Yeah,
that's the only way I could conceptualize making financial decisions with regards to me not drowning.
yes.
But I needed to live with two or three other people.
Yeah. So that's also a consideration, right? Like if you
Yeah,
are already living by yourself in a small flat or apartment back home, are you willing to potentially
to
be
share.
sharing a house, right?
Mm,
Like if you want to
yeah.
be in these big cities, like
Mm,
those a sacrifice that you're going to have to make.
to
But if you're
me.
happy to potentially be more in the rural countryside areas, which is also incredibly beautiful,
Mm,
then you may be able to afford maybe a one bedroom, or maybe, like I said, if the school provides a space for you, you'd have that ability to stay there for a very subsidized amount of
yeah.
rent.
Right. Yeah. So I think, I mean, like everything, my love, it's this idea of you need to do your pros and cons list very intentionally, and you need to know what can I sacrifice in order for me to be okay, and what can I not sacrifice. And if the
Mm,
school and the conversation you're having around the school meets up your pros and cons expectation, then you're going to be happy. Just people need to, when you're coming to move abroad, just be careful not to overstretch yourself with regards to the things that you're not
yes.
willing to sacrifice just because you're saying this is an opportunity of a lifetime, because you're gonna drown and you're gonna be miserable. Just make sure that you're not too overly ambitious, you're not overstretching yourself, and you're really honest with the things that are not deal breakers and the things that are deal breakers. But
Hmm.
with regards to like everything else, my love, this conversation has been so amazing. I'm just needing to know, we spoke about lifelong learning.
Yes.
What has been that one book for you that you feel like, you know what, everybody at home, everybody in this channel, everybody in jail who deems themselves a scholar or an educationalist or just
Mm.
a learner needs to read, and what was it about that book that stood out for you?
I think so. I'm currently reading this book and I've got it next to me. But I was
Mhm.
introduced to this by one of my colleagues, and it's called The Four Tendencies. Oh, the screen is not. Sorry. It's called The
Yeah.
Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin, and it's
Mhm.
more on the lines of on understanding psychology. And
Nice.
what it does, it tries to explain certain personality profiles and types,
Mhm.
and she categorizes them into four areas. So you're either an obliger, where you meet outer expectations, but you never meet the inner expectation that may want
Mhm.
to hold for yourself. You could be an
Mhm.
upholder, which is you meet both expectations. A rebel, where you meet neither, or you are a questioner, where you meet your inner expectations, but you don't meet the outer expectations.
Awesome.
And so, what
Okay.
she discusses in this book is how these people are grouped, why they're grouped in this way, but also what are different ways of interacting with these groups of people.
Mm.
What may they be good at? And the reason I'm finding this really useful to read is because it will really help you in the classroom to understand that
As a
student even more.
teacher, yes.
right? Because
Yes.
sometimes you may think, oh, the student is just not behaving well, or they're not wanting to do this in a specific way, but
Mm,
it never really clicks as to why. And so,
mm.
again, with psychology, there's always different theories and stuff, but I'm finding this very useful at this point in time for me to be
Because it
like,
has that practical element that
yeah,
makes you understand the
where like
why.
this student is an upholder and they need more structure.
Mm,
Okay, let me give them that structure that they need. Or this person is a rebel and let's not push them in this specific matter because they'll
yeah.
come around in their own time, you know?
Yeah.
But it also helps me in understanding my colleagues and how I should interact with them a bit more. So
Nice.
I'm
Love that.
finding it a
Yeah.
very useful way of understanding the people around me because that
Around
can
you.
also help me with my interactions on a daily basis or with conflict resolution if need be. And so I would really recommend this book for people who just want to see or understand people from a different perspective.
Mm, mm. And that should be as teachers. I mean, I think one of the other things that is literally gonna get me bankrupt is this channel, because every week, like, all my guests have such beautiful book recommendations, and then after the conversation, if like today I'm not with baby, and then I'm on the phone with him, like, baby, this is the new book we need to get, and I'm just like, oh my god, girl, you already have 5 books that you haven't read, that you've just got recommendations from, and this is what excites me,
Mm,
because every day I have this conversation. I'm like, if there's one thing I'm gonna get out of this, outside of the amazing conversation I'm gonna have with my guests, because even my guests are very intentional from my point of view, is the book recommendation. So this is
yes.
the one thing I look forward to, but let's talk about the you. Who has
Mm,
been that one teacher that made you feel like the reason I'm a teacher, or this is the life lesson you taught me that still upholds me, and the values and the morals I hold that make me walk as tall as I do today? Who has been that one teacher for you?
mm, I feel like there's so many teachers that have made an impact, but if I think about
Yes.
one, the one who
Yeah.
I continuously like, if I refer back to, her name is Mrs. Rembold, and she was
Mm-hmm.
my physics teacher. And
Nice.
she came in, I think, when I was in grade 9, and as a new, she is a very experienced teacher, but she was new to the school.
Yes.
And I remember that she was just so proactive in everything
Mm,
that she did.
mm,
The energy that she had, the way that she would push you, the way that she would challenge you. I remember
mm.
I was at some point in grade 11, like physics was becoming a bit
Not
too
your thing.
difficult. It was
Yes.
becoming too difficult. And then with encouragement and feedback that she gave, I wrote my mid-year exam. This was before I went to the school after my next school afterwards, but I wrote that exam and I came back with like a 90 something percent. And I'm like,
Nice.
yo, like
Girl.
within a few months, I was able to make such a change in
Drastic improvement.
my position
Yeah.
to academics and my position
Mm,
to the subject just because of that extra bit of encouragement, that extra
mm,
bit of wanting to help. Um, so she really influenced me in a very positive way.
mm,
And I think
mm.
that's always sort of resonated with me, and it kept building on with my experiences with other teachers
Yes.
who made me want to come into the education space.
Right. And I mean, with regards to, I know this should have been later, but now that you're speaking about this, I remember this one part. What is that one interview question that you think each person should prepare for? That is always in, it was both in your international school as an
Mm,
intern, but it's also in the school that you're in now. And you feel some of us really um, have that question determine whether the school is going to take you or not, if there is such a question.
hmm. Yeah, it is a difficult one. But what I'm thinking is like, for example, if I had to ask somebody, is who are you? Like, who are
Mm,
you?
mm.
And what can you offer?
Bring. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's not about doing the basics. They're looking for a holistic point of view. They're looking
Mm,
at, are you an actual fit for the school based on how you describe yourself, how you
mm,
interact with me, and answering this question. But it's also thinking about knowing who you are, and this comes to like what you were saying earlier, like knowing, having a story for yourself.
mm,
How is that story going to translate to
so,
the entire ecosystem of the school,
mm,
right? How's it going to translate to the students, to the leadership, to your staff members, right?
Mhm.
And also to your outdoor commitment as well.
Mhm.
So I think that story of who you are can really resonate with people. And if you're able to show them that inner side to you and be vulnerable in these situations, it opens the door for questions that maybe they'd be more willing to delve away from structured questions into digging more about you because they find you so intriguing and so interesting.
Mhm. True. And I think for me that question, and the reason I ask is because I've realized how most of us don't know how to answer it. So a
Yeah.
lot of time the tell us about yourself or the who are you question is not about I like apple juice or I like ice cream
Exactly.
or I really like going for walks with my partner. But it's more about what experience are you bringing to the table? What is
Mm,
your practice? So what is your theory and what is your practice and how do you make them merge? And how does that then get interpreted into the classroom for our learners, for the people you work with, right? And I think most of us don't necessarily prepare ourselves to answer that question in a way that allows
mm,
us to show the interview panel or the interviewing group who we are. We always make it so robotic and so I have a PGCE, I have a BEd, I have a low
exactly.
degree, and I love sports and I love soccer and I love running. But after doing all of these things, as the interviewer, the interviewer is just sitting there and saying, but so does the next 5,000 people.
Exactly.
How
Exactly.
does all of that then make you who you are? And I think from how we had this conversation, the biggest thing I'm getting from you is this idea of being not only transparent, but have the eagerness to learn, be willing to learn,
Absolutely.
like just put yourself out there. I think that is the highlight of this conversation, that this is how putting myself out to the universe allowed the universe to open the biggest opportunity of my life. And
Mm.
I'm so grateful for that. I think what would you have be your parting words to us as entry level teachers or even experienced teachers that want to get into this train of international teaching?
I would say that if you really want to enhance your teaching skills and be able to learn a lot more, it being out of the country for an extended period of time or even a short period of time can really
Yes.
enhance your skill set. It opens you up to an entirely new culture, new sense
Mhm.
of diversity, that if you decide to return back home, you would be able to impart that knowledge amongst
Mhm.
our students, right? To help prepare them for a future-proof world. But
Exactly.
I think another a challenge that you could face is that you feel guilty about leaving, and it's
Yo.
about recognizing is that you are doing something else for your country. You are
Mm.
out there representing. You are out there potentially getting people to actually come and visit back
Connect.
home to spend the money.
Exactly.
We are contributing.
You
We are
are.
contributing to the economy by being outside, right?
Mm.
Because we're trying to put on a good face for the country. You are trying to
Yeah.
share our stories about
Mm.
our background and our history.
Mm.
So never feel guilty when you know that you are doing a good thing, right?
Yeah. And I
Because
mean, honestly, always remember that we can't all stay. If we could, we
exactly,
would have been staying.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So just never stop feeling like an imposter, I think. And then it's gonna take
Mhm.
time. It's gonna take time for us
Yes.
to get out of this mindset
And intentionality.
and
And intentionality.
intentionality. But let's be
Yeah.
cognizant about trying to
Yes.
change that narrative.
Yes, yes. And I mean, we really did speak about it on such length that when you leave the country, you're representing your family, but everybody else. And for you
Yes,
to be proud of where you come from is one of the things that are going to make you really stand firm in the ground that you walk in. And,
exactly.
and I'm so appreciative. Like, thank you so much, Fish, for this conversation, my
Oh, thank
darling. Like,
you for
thank you
having me.
so much. There's like I don't want to go sleep, friend. I need to wake up tomorrow, but I want to continue, and I can't stop, because you're giving us such great golden nuggets, and I think your perspective and your viewpoint is giving me that hunger that a lot of our educational students or our entry level teachers need
Mm,
to see, like visible in the global space, because that's what a lot of us have, but we don't know where to from here.
yes.
So I'm really thankful for you from that perspective. Thank you so, guys. I mean, if you're still here, I know you got everything, because I did. I'm sitting here and I'm like, we've got this, we can do this, we're capable of doing this. And those are the things I'm getting from Vishal, and I'm so appreciative. Please, 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 guys, do the amazing things of liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing. Talk to us about who you want to see in this, not so much hot seat. Yes, Vish, I think this was such a nice conversation.
Oh,
I
so
really hope
lovely.
you guys in a hot seat at all. And if you are a teacher doing the things that need to be done in these global spaces, please comment down below with the information. And I'd really like to contact you, because this is a community. It's not about me and Vishal, it's about us as young, thriving global educationers that are trying to be future ready, not only for ourselves, but for the countries that we come from. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.